Hello everybody and welcome to michaelalbany.com and Michael Albany Photography. We're going to look at Photomatix again today. I'm expecting this to be a 3, maybe a 4-part series. I don't know yet because I haven't walked all the way through it. Don't know how long it's going to take. But we're going to definitely do at least 3 parts because there's quite a bit to look at in Photomatix Pro. And we're going to look at Photomatix Pro again. In our last tutorial, basically what I did was I walked you through the plugin area. This time what we're going to do is we're going to walk you through the actual program. We've opened up the program, and this time we're going to generate an HDR image. And once we get our window, we're going to select our source images. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to select 1194, 95, 96, and 97. And we click Open, and you'll see our 4 images there. Now, I happen to know that 1196 has some people walking through it, and that's why I reshot and the exact same exposure on 1197. I was doing these manually rather than with bracketing, so there is going to be some noise in the picture that we didn't want. So if you decide that there's one in here that you clicked on accidentally or you really don't want, you just highlight it and click Remove. Boom, gone. And then what you do is you go ahead and you click OK, and you get your second window. And in our second window, you'll see Align Source Images, Crop or Don't Crop, by correcting horizontal and vertical shifts or by matching features. In this case, I'm going to go with by matching features. We're going to reduce chromatic aberrations. We're going to reduce noise because I like to do that whenever possible. We're going to also attempt to reduce ghosting artifacts, either by background movements, water and foliage, or by moving objects and people. So we're going to go with moving objects and people in this case because there's not really a whole lot of foliage in the images. And then you have your other options down here. These particular images or options are disabled because raw files do not have a tone curve. So if you're doing a PSD, DNG, or a JPEG, you will have these options. Our white balance, you could change that if you wanted to whatever you want. You could actually preview a sample of something. We're not going to worry about that. We're going to go into as shot. We're going to leave it as is. I like to work in sRGB, although Adobe RGB and ProPhoto RGB have wider gamuts across the way. I use sRGB in my whole workflow, Lightroom, Photoshop, Photomatix, and any other plugins that I use. We click OK, and it'll take a moment for us to generate our image, and I'm going to pause the video and come back when our video or our image is open, so that you don't have to sit here for the minute and a half or so, 2 minutes, it takes to open up our HDR image. Okay, and we're back. You'll notice that our image is open and we are ready to rock and roll here. And you're looking at this image and you're going, that's not HDR, that's kind of ugly. Well, yeah, it is, but notice our preview up here in our preview window in the upper left hand corner shows us where we are and what an image looks like when we get into the HDR. As a matter of fact, if we go down to the second floor window, we can see that we have something in the window in the background on the right side, not on the left. Whoop, we even have something sitting on the windowsill there. And in order to really be able to see this HDR image, what we do is we go into tone mapping. And we just click on the button there, we go into tone mapping. It'll take just a moment to open up so that we can actually tone map our image, which is the part of HDR that we want to do. We're going to move this down to 1/8 so you can actually see the image. And we'll even kick it up to about 140, I guess, because that'll fit on our screen. And you'll see a little bit of noise in the background. You'll see a little bit of flying around in our flag, but you'll notice that for the most part our image looks fairly good. It's kind of Harry Potterish, but if we were to open up to the default, this is what you would have seen. Now, I had already opened it up a little bit ago, and that was the last one I was using, so it was set up to our preset of previous, or my previous exposure. Now, if we go in and we look at natural, we'll see that natural is fairly natural, but fairly flat. And if we went into painterly, it's a little bit more interesting, but we get a lot of noise in the sky. So maybe smooth skies. That smooths our skies, but it also smooths a lot of the detail in our building. Now, we could do a manual HDR from here so to keep our noise to a minimum in the top here, or it already is an HDR. I guess I should have used the word grunge, but we also have a grunge preset. Now, you can also create and set presets if you'd like. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize all these menus here, and we'll get to those in a moment. I'm actually going to go back to Smooth Skies, and I'm going to create the exact or a similar look to what you just saw. You can see our details up here in our window. But the first thing what we're going to do is we're going to go up to our strength. And last time I dealt with tone compressor, so this time I'm going to deal with details enhancer. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to crank our strength all the way up to 100. Doesn't seem to do much, but it will in a moment. We're going to bring our color saturation up, and we're going to bring that up to about 80-ish. There's 80 right there. And that's going to really saturate our image. And this is where we're going to get that look. We're going to bring our luminosity all the way up to 10. Then we're going to bring our micro contrasting all the way up to 10. We're getting somewhere. We're starting to pick up a little bit more of that really highly saturated and highly contrasty image. What we're going to do now is we're going to go into smoothing. Now if we bring our smoothing all the way over to the right, you'll notice that it smooths everything out, makes it look kind of natural. If we drop it all the way down to -10, it gives it that ghosty effect. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave it right about 3/4, which is about a 4 in this case, I guess, which is also nice. But we could also go into light mode and click on low. I think I like that. Still needs a little bit more work, doesn't have enough contrast in it and stuff, but it's a good place to start. You could go medium, high, or max, minimum. For the look we're going for today, the high contrast, very saturated, grunge type image, you go into smoothing and you click low. And our first little drop down of menu here is tone settings. We have our white point setting at about 2.25, or what am I saying, 2.5, at about 1/4%. We can bring that up, say, to, oh, I'm going to guess at about 1.5 to, let's go for 1.75. Okay, 1.779. How's that? Whoa, bright. Very bright. Brightens it up quite a bit. But we're going to bring our black point up, and in this case, you can bring it all the way up to 4 or 5 and really make it some contrasty image. You can drop it down to where I usually do, which is about 1/4%, which is okay. We're going to drop that puppy in right at about the same 1.779 this time. We can bring our gamma all the way up to 0.35, useless. All the way down to 2, useless. Or we can just click on here and click our undo twice and go back to our default of 1, which I like, so we're going to stick with that. That's all we have to do with tone settings, so we're going to click that out, and then we're going to go into color settings. And we can change our temperature, which bring it all the way up, which kind of makes it yellowy and odd. Or we could bring it all the way down to a -10, which makes it washed out and flat. Or we could hit undo twice and go right back to our 0. Our saturation highlights, we could bring those all the way up. Not much of a change. All the way down. Yeah, that kind of makes it look really, really bad. Kind of like it's pasted on there. Or we could click undo twice and go back to our default, which I still kind of like. Saturation of shadows, we can increase those. And again, not a big difference. Desaturation of shadows, and we get the opposite effect. The parts that were colorful before, and when our highlights were desaturated, are now desaturated. So if you did both, you'd get almost a black and white image with a little bit of color. We're going to bring them both back to 0, or right next to 0. And I think we're going to stick with that look. And we're going to come out of color settings and we're going to go into miscellaneous settings. And our micro smoothing here is set to 30, which is really, really high. If we bring it all the way down, say to 5, we get a lot more noise, but we get a little bit more contrast edge too. But you get a lot of that noise. So I'm going to bring that back up to 30. Our shadow smoothness, if we bring that up to 100, our highlight smoothness is already at 100. This smooths out our image, but it takes away from a lot of what we look at. We bring our highlight smoothness down, it gives us a little bit more contrasting type image. I'm going to bring that up to right about 15 and leave it as it is. And our shadow clipping, if we brought it all the way up to 100, it just makes our windows dark again. Let's leave that down where it is. We're set, we're ready to go. We've gone through this one. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and process this image to actually create the HDR image. And then what we'll do after that is we'll save it and bring it into Photoshop. But while we're tone mapping, until you see that, I just want to let you know that bringing it into Photoshop is going to be part 2 of our tutorial, and we'll do that next. But first, let's take a look at what we have. You notice our tone map timescales, clicking right up there. There's our image as we have it right now. We're going to bring that into Photoshop in just a few moments, but for now, and until next time, happy shooting. Stay tuned for part 2.